Hello and welcome to another Tunfa Media lesson. This is our second Max lesson, and it's about synthesizing a snare drum. And if you're following along this series, you may have noticed that we are building ourselves a nice little analog style drum set. So we're going to implement a lot of the things that we covered in our first lesson. And if you haven't watched the previous lesson, go ahead and watch it. And at the end of the lesson, please make sure to click the link below and download this patch for free. Okay, so let's start from scratch with a new patcher, and let's make ourselves a nice little trigger. And send a bang. So every time I press my MIDI keyboard, I should get a bang. Okay, so the same as our first lesson, in order to synthesize a good sounding snare drum, we have to understand the physics of a drum and the physics of the snare and really try to kind of mimic the entire thing using a bunch of numbers and oscillators. I personally like to break down the sound of the snare into three different sounds. The first one is the body or the tone of the snare. And the second one is the snap. And lastly, the noise or the sizzle. So we're trying to approach each sound separately and then kind of have a mix between all three sounds. All right, let's start with the body or the tone of the snare drum. So like our bass drum, we're going to use a simple, pure cycle. And we're going to use this trick with the phaser in order to be accurately in phase every time we trigger the snare. So this is actually covered in our first lesson. And I need to send this phaser a pitch envelope. Now, if you remember, we talked about a little bit about the physics of drums, and we said that when you hit the bass drum, you kind of have this high pitch. The highest pitch of the bass drum starts in the attack, and then it decays with a pitch, kind of a pitch drop. And if you think about it, that makes a lot of sense because the membrane is kind of slowing down. The only difference in the snare that I like to do is instead of sending a function that starts on 1 and then simply multiplied all the way to 0. In the last lesson, we basically multiplied the frequency that we chose, and we multiplied it by 1 and then 0.999 and so on, all the way to 0. So we basically ended up with 0 hertz for our drum. So in this case, I actually want the low point to be the chosen frequency, and I want to start with a really high frequency. So I'm going to do exactly that. And today, instead of using the function, I'm just going to write directly into the curve object, and I'm going to show you how it works. Let's do a little bit of a pseudocode here. So the curve object can be filled in with a starting point, and then we enter the target point, and we set it in some time. And the last argument that we can send is the type of slope or the curve. So for example, minus 0.8 will be a nice kind of curvy slope. So we need to send some number, and then we're going to send the target number in some amount of time. And my slope, I want it to be minus 0.8. I'm going to need an initial number, a target frequency, and time. Now, I can do something fancy about the initial number. Instead of just having a free number here, I can basically do a plus from the original frequency. Okay, now I have to pack all of them, so it's pack without a C, which means that it's packing numbers into a list without waiting for all of the numbers to be packed together. And I need to declare that there are 3 floating numbers and do something like that. So I'm just packing the numbers. So now I have, let's just bring this down. So now I should have a list of numbers. And as you can see, my first number is the amount added to the second number. This won't change without any, without triggering this with a bang. So trigger a bang. So I need to go like that. So now it will change individually. So I have this list of 3 numbers and I can send it here. And I want every time I press the trigger, I want to send this number to the phaser, which will send to the phase inlet of the cycle. And the curve is obviously going to the phase, like that. So I should have a pretty nice envelope. Let's add the gain. Okay, here you go. For example, let's start here. Let's increase this number. And we have this laser effect. Okay, now I need some kind of an amp envelope. I like to use the function, and this is something we covered in our first lesson. And send another curve. And the amp envelope is fairly easy because it's just multiplying the signal with the numbers from here. So basically I have two things. We have attack and we have some kind of decay. So if we're multiplying the cycle with this curve, we should get our snare body or tone. Let's add a gain. I don't know what I got rid of this gain. And just exciting this function. Okay, so this is what we have now. So we can say like I want 120 hertz to be my snare, and I want like 100 hertz higher to start, 100 hertz higher, and like 400 milliseconds. In here I can play with the decay or the attack. So for example, I can take point number 012, so I can put point number 2 and send some number to it. Also, I have to point out what kind of slope, what kind of curve I need. And let's put a float here. I also need to say that this is Y0. There you go. Now I have decay. Awesome. I can take this entire thing and do Command-Shift-E to encapsulate all this thing and call it body, just to kind of make everything a little nicer. Okay, so we're done with the body or the tone. Let's move on to the snap. Now, there's a lot of different approaches for the snap. I'm going to do a fairly simple one right now. Just going to add a noise with a simple line object, which line is like a curve without the curves. And I can say that I want to go from 1 to 0 in, let's go really fast, like in 3 milliseconds. It's going to be like pretty much like a click. And just multiply them together. And we add this gain. Let's see what we have. So let's do something like that. Oh, and I need to send this trigger. Okay. Can throw in a 1 pole on this one, maybe to just make it a little bit softer. So now I have body and kind of a snap. Last thing is our noise, or we call it noise or also Cecil. Because we're using Max, we can kind of try new things and approach some traditional things in a different way. And Max 8 is kind of great because it has this feature of sending multiple channels, or I think they call it MC. Basically creates a lot of instances of the same thing and sending them through different channels, spreading them by default as left, right, left, right, left, right, all the way to 1024. So I can use noise like that and maybe double it and send it to left and right. But I can also do something interesting in Max 8 and adding this MC, call it noise, and say that this noise has two instances of noise. So if we're putting MC gain with 2 channels, chance 2, like that, see that the cable is kind of a blue cable, and we do MC easy DAC, we should have a very nice stereo noise. And noise is great in stereo because it's random. It has this kind of nice width. So this is fairly easy. All I have to do with this noise is to put a curve and send from 1 to 0 in some time. And this will be my envelope. And let's send the time like that. And if I don't want to trigger this envelope every time I'm changing a number here, I can put another message and just send the number to this message. And this message will act as also the bang from the trigger, like that. And I need to multiply it, but because we're using 2 channels, I will use an MC and then multiply. And I think I don't need to, but I can say that these are 2 channels. So now I'm fitting 2 channels into this side, meaning that I'm adding them together. And I want to multiply these 2 channels with this curve, so I don't need any extra channel for this curve. Let's see if we have what we got. So let's just document this a little bit. This one is the decay of, this is the actual decay. And I can also send a attack, of course. And I don't need this slope like that. So I'm sending the index number of the index number of 1. So this is the second point actually, because we're starting on 0. And I'm saying move through the x-axis while y is always 1. And I can basically do something like that. Quite easily, we created our little envelope with attack as well. And lastly, we have this decay for the noise. So we have a lot of different options to choose from in order to shape our snare. I hope you got a good general idea and approach to synthesizing and making your own module for a snare sound. And thank you for watching. If you like this video, please subscribe for more. I'm trying to upload this series on a weekly basis. And as we go along, you see that we're adding more and more modules, and we're really getting deep into this journey of exploration in Max and kind of crafting your own sound in your own setup. If you want to use this patch, go ahead and click the link below to download for free. And see you next time. Stay tuned.